Emerging Threats Hub. The Hormuz Vise, Europe's Awakening, and the Robot Frontline.
Is the Strait of Hormuz a weapon for Iran or a noose? And as America pivots its arsenal toward the Middle East, is Europe being forced to grow up faster than it ever planned? Welcome to Emerging Threats Hub. I am Sebastian, and today we are unpacking a world in transition. We are moving past the tired headlines of who fired what, and instead we are examining the architecture of global stability, or the lack thereof. This week, we are looking at three intersecting threads. First, the Vise of the Strait of Hormuz, where a U.S. blockade is exposing not just Iran's vulnerabilities, but the limits of American power. Second, we travel to the Robot Frontline in Ukraine, where unmanned ground vehicles are making history, and European defense is undergoing a radical, data-driven awakening. Finally, we go under the radar to explore how the globalization of cartel operations is forcing a rewrite of the rules of irregular warfare. We are not just looking at the world's flashpoints, we are analyzing the systems that create them and exploring the blueprints for building a more stable peace. Let us begin.
The Hormuz Crucible.
Our first segment today focuses on the active conflict dominating the news cycle, the escalating confrontation in the Strait of Hormuz. Let us set the current state of play. The United States has initiated a major military endeavor, a naval blockade of Iran. The exact number of warships enforcing this blockade remains opaque, but the logistical undertaking is massive. In response, Iran has declared the Strait of Hormuz shut. Merchant vessels attempting to cross have reported receiving radio messages from Iran's navy denying them passage, and some have even reported being hit by gunfire. It is a dangerous standoff, with immediate human and economic costs rippling through global maritime traffic. Now, the traditional realist perspective, our old friend the deterministic paradigm, would view this as a classic mechanical struggle for power. Realism treats geography as a fixed, unchangeable law of nature. In the realist view, Hormuz is a choke point, and controlling it is simply a matter of material power. But as we know, the international system is not a timeless mechanical machine. It is socially constructed by shared ideas, beliefs, and identities. Anarchy, as Alexander Wendt reminds us, is what states make of it. So, what is Iran making of Hormuz? A recent analysis from Foreign Affairs offers a striking constructivist insight. For Iran, Hormuz is more a weakness than a weapon. The realist model fails here because it ignores how identity and economic vulnerability interact. Tehran has constructed a narrative of resistance, using the strait as a symbolic weapon against the Atlanticist order. But a U.S. blockade threatens the regime's internal grip. By shutting down the strait, Iran chokes its own economic lifeline. It is a constructed weapon that fires inward just as much as it fires outward. This brings us to the ceasefire. Iran initially rejected a ceasefire, but ultimately accepted it. Why? Because the identity-driven narrative of perpetual resistance collided with the material reality of systemic vulnerability. And this ceasefire has exposed the limits of American power. As Rusi notes, the world is learning to work around America. The U.S. was forced to rely on others to contain a crisis of its own making. Meanwhile, Foreign Affairs points out that the Iran war is a strategic win for China, creating a window for Beijing as Washington is distracted. The global South is learning to navigate crises without relying on American hegemony, actively constructing a new, multipolar reality. The solution lens. Beyond military action, what are the critical non-military levers for de-escalation? First, we must establish multilateral maritime security frameworks. Not a unilateral American blockade, but a coalition that includes neutral actors to guarantee safe passage. Second, diplomatic back channels must be utilized to allow Tehran to save face, decoupling their identity of resistance from the physical closure of the strait. Finally, economic incentives such as targeted sanctions relief in exchange for maritime de-escalation, can align Iran's material needs with a more constructive regional identity.
Tech and tactics. The robot frontline.
Let us now pivot from the high seas to the modern battlefield, specifically the technological revolution happening in Ukraine. Our second segment connects the active conflict in the Middle East to a global defense transformation. This week, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced a historic first. Ukrainian robots have captured an enemy position without a single human soldier present. Unmanned ground vehicles, or UGVs, are fundamentally rewriting the calculus of infantry warfare. This is not science fiction. It is happening on the muddy front lines today. But technology alone does not win wars. The social construction of defense ecosystems does, and Europe is waking up to this reality. The European Union has just pumped over $1 billion into defense research and development, centered around Ukraine war lessons. This funding marks a profound shift to 21st century warfare, prioritizing loitering munitions and affordable mass drone production. Even more significant is the new bilateral data sharing agreement between Germany and Ukraine. Berlin is getting a front-row seat to the performance of German weapons, like the Panzerhaubitze 2000, the RCH-155 artillery, and the Iris-T air defense system. Ukraine is effectively becoming a live testing lab for European defense. Italy is also strongly interested in joint drone production with Ukraine. This is a practical pathway to integrate battlefield lessons directly into the defense industrial base, bypassing the slow, Cold War-era procurement processes that have plagued the West. However, we must address the AI and drone ecosystem arms race. A recent CSIS report details how Russia is building a sovereign drone ecosystem for AI-driven autonomy. They are integrating artificial intelligence into unmanned systems through a coordinated, state-directed ecosystem. In contrast, the Western model remains fractured. Yes, the U.S. Air Force recently tested Anduril's YFQ-44A, semi-autonomous combat drone, and France is readying an AI-powered combat data management system, similar to the U.S. Maven project. But individual tests do not equal a unified ecosystem. Russia's approach, while driven by an authoritarian construct, is institutionally integrated. The West's approach is still reliant on ad hoc private sector innovation. The stability question. How does this technology create new risks for escalation? Autonomous systems lower the threshold for attack. If a robot can capture a trench without risking a soldier, the political cost of offensive action drops dramatically. What new frameworks might be needed? We urgently require arms control treaties and norms of use for AI-driven autonomy. Just as we constructed the non-proliferation regime for nuclear weapons, we must now architect a diplomatic framework for autonomous systems to prevent an algorithmic arms race from spiraling out of control.
Europe's strategic awakening.
Our thematic deep dive today naturally follows from the tech and tactics we just discussed. Europe's strategic awakening. The European Union's defense posture is undergoing a constructivist revolution. For decades, Europe's identity was constructed around the idea of an American security guarantee. But as the U.S. delays weapons deliveries to Europe to feed the Iran war, that shared idea is fracturing. The reality is forcing Europe to construct a new identity, one of strategic autonomy. EU Defense Chief Andrius Kubilius is pitching a new treaty to build a European defense union, a Schengen-style pact for defense that could be open to the UK, Norway, and Ukraine. This is liberalism in action, not a naive utopian ideal, but a powerful set of ideas that, when acted upon, can construct a more cooperative reality. But this awakening faces severe bottlenecks. Lawmakers are warning that fuel scarcity is European armies' Achilles' heel. You can have all the AI drones in the world, but without jet fuel and diesel, armies cannot move. The next multi-annual financial framework must adapt to this new geopolitical reality. Meanwhile, the alliances are shifting in fascinating ways. Turkey is pushing for a larger role in Europe's defense. Ankara's defense minister warned that shutting out Turkey from EU defense initiatives would cause more damage than the US pulling troops from the continent. This is a direct challenge to the old Atlanticist construct. And looking globally, Japan's imminent easing of arms export rules, its biggest opening since World War II, has sparked strong interest from Warsaw to Manila. Rattled by questions over American commitment, U.S. allies are constructing new bilateral and multilateral ties, independent of Washington. Yet, Europe faces a delicate diplomatic balance. A foreign affairs analysis notes that Europe still needs China, with some policymakers viewing Washington, not Beijing, as the bigger systemic threat. This is the inherent tension in Europe's new identity: how to build a defense union that secures the continent without severing the economic lifelines that make it prosperous. The solution lens. How can this enhanced defensive posture be coupled with diplomatic initiatives? Europe must ensure its Schengen-style defense pact is inclusive, not exclusive. Integrating Turkey is not just a military necessity. It is a diplomatic imperative to prevent Ankara from drifting toward a competing civilizational identity, like the Eurasianist project. Furthermore, Europe's new defense identity must explicitly include a robust diplomatic track with the Global South, ensuring that strategic autonomy is not perceived as isolationism, but as a reliable, principled partner in a multipolar world.
Under the radar.
And now, time to go under the radar. This week, we are looking at a story you probably have not seen in the headlines, but one that could have major implications for regional stability. We are looking at the concept of administrative terrain and the globalization of cartels. In modern irregular warfare, outcomes are not just decided by who has the most firepower. According to Small Wars Journal, they are decided in regulatory frameworks, compliance regimes, and bureaucratic authority structures. This is the administrative terrain that determines who is authorized to act. Special Operations Forces, or SOF, must navigate this bureaucratic labyrinth before they can even think about kinetic action. It is a reality check for the romanticized view of special warfare. The pen is often mightier than the sword, especially when the pen is writing the rules of engagement. Simultaneously, General Francis Donovan presented his first posture statement to the House Armed Services Committee regarding Southcom's view of the threat landscape. He highlighted the return of force in the Americas, specifically the rise of gunboats and cartels. But here is the under-the-radar twist. Cartels are repositioning into Africa. The globalization of illicit supply chains is entering a new phase. What was once a transit problem for Africa drugs moving through the continent is now a production problem. Cartels are relocating drug manufacturing to Africa, constructing new transnational networks that bypass traditional interdiction strategies. This connects directly back to our core theme. The international system is like a social network. The structure exists, but the norms of interaction are created by the users. Cartels are exploiting the administrative terrain, finding the gaps in our regulatory networks, and constructing a parallel global order. Just as states navigate the bureaucratic terrain of international law, non-state actors are weaponizing that same terrain against us. We cannot solve the cartel problem with gunboats alone. We must outcompete them on the administrative terrain, building resilient legal and regulatory frameworks that close these loopholes. So, this week, we have seen how the tactical use of a naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz is forcing Europe to rethink its fundamental defense posture. We have seen how the historic first of unmanned robots in Ukraine is driving a $1 billion shift in European research and development. And we have seen how the administrative terrain of bureaucracy is the true battlefield against globalized cartels. The connective tissue here is identity and technology, and the challenge they present is one of speed. Our weapons are evolving faster than our diplomatic tools. Our illicit networks are evolving faster than our regulatory frameworks. The path to stability, therefore, is not just about building better defenses, but about building smarter, faster, and more inclusive diplomatic and regulatory frameworks. The question we must all ask is, are we innovating for peace as quickly as we are innovating for war? Thank you for joining me on Emerging Threats Hub. I am Sebastian. Stay analytical, and we will continue to connect the dots next time.